You have any managerial or upper management announcements to make today, or not ready yet?
If you're asking directly about David Ross, I think the reports you guys had were accurate. I think I've said, a number of times, I think David has done a fantastic, job as a manager. I think, he's learned a ton on the job. Even while learning, I think he's excelled. I think he's, kept morale good. I think he's run the staff very well. I love having him as a partner. So, obviously, like, we've had some, preliminary discussions on an extension. I think that was the report that was out there. That's accurate. So our hope certainly is that David's here, for a long time.
Jed, where do things stand with the coaching staff? Have you guys determined who is and is not coming back?
Yeah, we've had discussions. I think that the ones I'm sort of prepared to announce, obviously Anthony Iapoce, I think that's been public that we've moved on. Post is, if anyone knows him, he's a fantastic human being, as positive as anyone can be. We brought him back to the organization after he'd been the hitting coordinator when we had this core group coming up through the minor leagues. Obviously, he did a great job developing those guys. We brought him back here after he was in Texas. And, I think at the end of this year, I think both sides sort of realized that this is, this was the right time to make that break, but nothing but, really positive things to say about a great baseball man. And I think, he came back here to help kind of try to get us back to where some of those guys had been. He worked incredibly hard, and super thankful for everything he did here. And then also on the coaching staff, Mike Borzello is not going to return. We have 10 years, 10 really great seasons. He was one of Dale's first hires when he came in here, and obviously a terrific hire. He's done so much for the organization as a strategist, as a catching coach. But I think both sides kind of felt like 10 years was the right amount of time, and I have no doubt he'll land on his feet and do great things. But I couldn't be more thankful for what he did here for 10 years.
Jed, you've talked a lot about the decisions sort of being pushed back till after you find out what is the CBA is going to look like. So what does the process look like beginning now for you guys to prepare for when that CBA does become agreed upon?
Yeah, that was a great question. And I think pro scouting and all the guys in the office, R&D, analytics, were obviously looking carefully at the both the free agent market and the trade market. I think it's our job to get ahead of that, to make sure we're as prepared as possible from a evaluation standpoint, as prepared as possible, from a strategic standpoint. And, right now, we will, spend this whole month, I wish we were playing, but we'll spend this whole month preparing, and then we'll be ready to go when the off season starts. And, how it relates to the CBA, I think that's a real question. I think we, that's a legitimate thing that everyone's going to be thinking through as they start their off seasons. The rules are going to change with how we do business. And I think that for everybody, I think the question is, how you move forward on certain things, given that, the rules are going to change. So that's going to be a factor. It's going to be a consideration for not just the Cubs, but, for all 30 teams as you start the offseason.
In that same vein, Jed, a lot of teams are trying to be proactive and sign some guys right away. How is that balancing act for you and your people, knowing strengths and weaknesses that you have, and you'd like to start out, but as you said, you don't know necessarily what the rules are going to be and how compensation will be impacted?
Yeah. We've done most of our extension talks. Normally we do those in the spring. I don't think we've ever done, kind of end of the season extensions, but, certainly, as I always say, like, I'm not going to announce who we're talking to, who we're not talking to, but, clearly there are players on the roster that we hope are here, for a long time, probably past their years of control, but I'm not going to sit here and talk about who we may or may not be extending, just like I've kind of never done that, nor did Theo.
Jed, does what Frank Schwindel did in the 2 terrific months that he had convince you guys that is your first choice and your first baseman going into spring training next year?
Well, I'd say first of all, that was a lot of fun to watch. I mean, watching the way he played, just with the energy he had, the way he grinded his at bats, the ability to hit for power without striking out much was really special. And I couldn't be more happy for him in his situation to go out and improve it the way he did. I think Frank is going to be a big part of our team next year. I'm not going to sort of make out lineups or, anoint, different guys at different positions, but, certainly, I'm excited he's on our team for next year. And I think he'll play a big role.
Jed, along those lines too, with the offense and just the way the whole lineup performed after the trade deadline, what did you guys learn or maybe take away from that you can apply to this team moving forward?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that we gave some guys opportunities that they might not have had, and I think that it was a lot of fun to watch guys, really, seizing the opportunity to perform in the big leagues every day. And obviously, it was frustrating. The losing part of it was certainly frustrating, but on the offensive side, like the part that for me that was gratifying every day was to watch the hustle, watch the excitement, watch the way they grinded their at bats. Nothing was taken for granted. And, I think that's something we can take going forward. There was a hunger to those guys. They knew their opportunity. They had an opportunity to play in the big leagues every single day in a big market. And a bunch of those guys grabbed that opportunity and really seized it. And there's a lot to be said for that kind of hunger in players. And it was nice to see for 2 months.
I know you've made no secret of the desire to improve the contact rate, cutting down strikeouts. I'm not trying to pile on Anthony, but do you take a kind of a wider lens at this? And will Valleca be considered for that top hitting coach position?
Yeah, Val did a great job for us, and he's gonna be back in uniform for us for sure. We're gonna do a search. I think whenever you do a search process, you learn a lot. I don't want to comment on Val's status for that, but certainly he's going to be a big part of our hitting infrastructure. And no, I mean, listen, I think that that's a hard thing to pin on a hitting coach. The lineup and that we construct in a lot of ways is more responsible for things like contact rate. And there's no doubt we have to do a better job of that. That said, I mean, I think that, the ability to hit the ball in the seats is really important. It's sometimes a 4-hit inning is a lot more exciting, but the 3-run homer is actually what wins the game. And so we have to have a combination of those things. I don't want to overemphasize contact at the expense of power, but to say that we need to be a much more rounded offense, well-rounded offense, I think is probably the fairest way to say it. I think anyone that watched us for the last 3 or 4 years knows that we got one-dimensional at times. We did lack contact. We did sort of wait around for homers, and we didn't have many rallies. We didn't have many multi-hit innings and things like that. So I think we have to be a well-rounded offense. On base percentage is important, slug is important, but also the ability to put the ball in play at the right times is important. And we can't really lose sight of any of those things.
Hey, Jed, back to the guys that had second half success at the plate there. Is it fair or unfair to look at it with a skeptical eye when it's, playing for a lot less than it used to be? Obviously the standings didn't matter as much, and or the other team isn't prepping the same way because these are all new players. And I even include Ian Happ in that conversation.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't take anything away from the performance those guys had. I mean, they did it in the big leagues, and I think that's, I do think that the teams who are playing a lot of times are playing to make the postseason. So I do think they're prepping pretty hard. So I would never take anything away. I mean, I do think that when you're coming up in this game, there's like truisms that you learn that oftentimes are true, and people talk about being skeptical of spring performance, being skeptical of September performance as you evaluate it. And, there are reasons for that. You're playing against different rosters and sometimes, less experienced players and things like that. So I do think, yes, I think with any performance, I think you have to peel back the curtain, so to speak, and look at how that performance came about. What are the underlying numbers, of that performance? But I definitely don't want to take anything away from anyone, because again, those guys did it. The way they did it was impressive. And I think that they did it against teams that were competing to try to win, in a pennant race. And there's no doubt they were preparing hard to play against us for that reason.
Jed,
And with the starting rotation, go ahead.
Did you watch any of the American League wild card game last night?
I did. I was having 2015 Pittsburgh, PNC Park flashbacks with Schwarbs. But yeah, some people, put down baseball in October. I mean, to me, I can't say I'll watch every single game. Probably wouldn't be a very good dad if I did that, but I'm going to watch. I watch as much as I can, because this is why we do this. And as a fan, playoff baseball is amazing. There was a moment last night in the game. It was like a 2-2 pitch, and the crowd erupted when it was a ball. And I thought that's only in the playoffs that people scream for a 2-2 pitch and it's a ball. So I think it's a different level of intensity. That's what you're preparing a team to be, right? That when you watch the playoffs, you realize that you have to have a team that can handle only facing the best pitching, that can handle the intensity of those games. And so to me, you have to watch the postseason, because that's what we're trying to do. And that's the level that we want to play at. And it's because, I love baseball, and those are the most fun games to watch. So yeah, I watched that game last night, and I'll be watching all fall.
I mean, I know it was frustrating watching this offense at times over the last several years, but I guess how far away do you feel like the organization is from building another lineup that can compete at that level and make it to October?
That's a good question. I've used this kind of story a few times, but I think it's hard to put timelines on things. Like, I remember sitting in St. Louis in the summer of 2013 and looking at their lineup and looking at our lineup and feeling like we were literally light years away from being able to compete with them. And 2 years later, we beat them in the division series, and kind of kept going from there. And so I think things can change quickly. I think that's the goal. I think when you think about at least in the past, the National League lineup, but I guess, it may be 9 going forward, but it's been 8. Whenever I think about changing an offense, obviously depth is really important, but you change it one piece at a time. Like when we didn't get on base at all when we first got here. And we started to get on base when we started, kind of changing one player after another and improving one player after another. So I think it can happen quickly as you make those tweaks. And I'm sort of given comfort by what I witnessed last time, which is having that feeling of how are we going to catch up with this the 2013 Cardinals that had, won a World Series in 11 and went to the World Series in 13. And it happened, probably more quickly than we thought by kind of stacking one good decision on top of another.
To your point, Jed, the San Francisco Giants, does that come to mind as to how quickly something can turn around?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Giants, this has been a process, certainly, I think that they obviously have had their struggles before this year. It's been a process to build it, but you'd be crazy not to look at what they've done this year and take notes. They made some really shrewd acquisitions prior to this season, but in addition to that, they also got the most out of the players they had. And I think that's like those two stories are sort of equal parts. If you look at the success of the Giants, bringing in, I'll probably miss some guys, but obviously, they gave Gossman a qualifying offer. They brought in Desclafani, they brought in Alex Wood, to bolster their rotation, but also, and they made some shrewd, small deals offensively, like bringing in Wade, but at the same time, the unbelievable production they've gotten out of, Crawford and Belt and, Longoria and Posey. These are guys that, have had excellent careers, but they're having their best seasons in a long time. So I think that when I look at them, I think of both things. I think of both really shrewd acquisitions to get them there. But I also see them maximizing the talent they had in the roster and getting performances that they hadn't gotten in a number of years. So they're a lot of fun to watch. I think, for me, of all the teams we played this year, I thought they were the most challenging because they didn't give up any at-bats. It was a grind from the first pitch to the last pitch and all 7 games we played against them. And it's a testament to their roster building and to the way Gabe has gotten those guys to play.
You had a lot of moving parts on the starting rotation, Adbert to the pen, Steele, Keegan, you put them in the rotation. After seeing the way that, again, small sample size, but September unfolded, what pieces do you see needing to be filled before start of 2022?
Yeah. Well, I think that the guys you mentioned, Adbert, Steele, Keegan, those guys are going to be a significant part of what we're doing going forward. In exactly what role at what times during the year, I don't know that, but certainly they're going to be a big part going forward. Really we need to dramatically improve our pitching. I don't think there's any question about that. Our starting rotation simply wasn't good enough this year to compete. Our bullpen was excellent for a long stretch. And I think we can't forget, we traded away, Kimbrel, Chafin, Tepera at the deadline. I think, prior to that, our rotation, the first few innings of the game, the first 4 or 5 innings of the game was a struggle. But when we were good, when we were in first place, it was about the fact that we were really good getting the last 9 to 12 outs of the game. And so I thought the coaching staff did a great job with those guys and getting that whole bullpen to throw well. But if you sort of look at the whole season, there's no question that we have to acquire, more pitching, better pitching this winter. I think that'll be, the number one priority because that, said simply was the downfall of this season was that, our rotation was short and we weren't effective enough in terms of run prevention.
Hey, Jed, a follow up to that. Does that, with all your payroll flexibility you've got going forward, does that mean that we can expect that you'd be in on, say, the top 2 or 3 starting pitchers out there with where you guys are at and your needs?
Yeah, I'm not going to sort of tip our hand as far as what we do in free agency. I think I've said repeatedly that, we do have financial flexibility. We have money to spend this winter. But I think it's really important that we do that, do that in an intelligent way. Trying to win the offseason. I think we just talked about the Giants, for example. They certainly didn't win the offseason. They won the season. The Rays, lost Snell and lost Morton. They certainly didn't win the offseason last year. They won the season. And, I think that when you look at there are teams out there that made huge splashes. They were, aggressive. They were lauded for all the things they did, and they're not playing in October just like us. So, as we build this, I think it's really important to make one good decision after another. And I do think that's how I think about the offseason. We're trying to build a roster that can compete, but we're also trying to do it without we're not looking to win the offseason, which I think can be a real negative, both in terms of the season next year, but also in terms of the future. Using those 2 teams as an example, like the Giants and the Rays, their future is also very bright because they didn't do those things in the offseason. So that's something we have to keep in mind as we go through this.
Wait, so that probably means staying away from, say, the bigger ticket, top of the market guys, and maybe going for more volume or or upside picks or guys that you identify that maybe is not on everybody's obvious radar screen?
I wouldn't say that. I think it's just being opportunistic and sort of striking when you feel like the value is right, and I think, again, I when you talk about free agency, there's a bit of trepidation about what can be said and not said. But yes, I think, like I said, we're going to be active. We have a lot of holes to fill in this roster. We have a lot of areas we need to improve. So I think we're certainly going to be active, but I think we need to be active in a way that we feel like we're getting the right value for the dollars we're spending, and that we're also making sure that we're not hindering ourselves going forward with expenditures for right now.
On the same subject, Jed, just advancing it a little bit, would power pitching be, power arms be something that you would be looking at? Certainly you have a couple of young guys that you can turn to, but the consensus was that, a power arm and a left-handed arm was something that was missing in your staff.
Yeah. I mean, the way our staff evolved, through trade, and, we didn't have power stuff in our arsenal. And I think Kyle Hendricks, obviously he's been, so good for so long with his pitch mix, but, in a lot of ways, he's sort of a modern unicorn. You need power pitching, you need power arms to win in today's game. You need to be able to miss bats. I don't think there's no question about that. And when I said earlier to Taylor's question about, our pitching fell short, and a significant part of that is, we didn't strike enough guys out. We didn't, we also walked too many guys, but we just didn't, we didn't miss enough bats. We put too much pressure on our defense with that. And so, we definitely need to get more power arms. I think that's something we're actively developing in the minors, and I feel good about the progress there. But I think that's something we'll be looking for in free agency as well. The makeup of our staff this year was too contact oriented, so to speak, and that's something that needs to change.
Jed, on the topic of pitching, where do you view Alec Mills next year and maybe long term with this team? Do you consider him in the starting rotation for next year?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did a great job down the stretch this year. And, I try to, in general, you asked about those other pitchers earlier, I try to think about this in terms of ability to impact our staff. And certainly he's going to have a big part of that. I think that, I think the modern game, or the way that things are moving, this, locking in, here are 5 starting pitchers, here are the 8 relievers, and going forward, I think that's not the way the game is necessarily played sometimes. So I think Alec has a big role on our team next year. I think he's best when he does start. And so I expect him to, like I said, play a big role, but I'm just reluctant to sit here and tick off one rotation spot after another, because I think, as we saw this year, it's going to take a lot more than 5 guys to get through this. And, we use 69 players this year. So I think I'm expecting a lot of guys that are going to need to contribute, and all 4 of the pitchers we've mentioned so far, I think, are going to be a big part of our roster.
Jed, on the young pitchers, we saw success out of Keegan and Justin out of the bullpen, and Justin mentioned at the end of the season how that helped them. Moving forward, is that a part of development that you see could be possible, bringing young arms up through the bullpen first?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of that. I don't think you do it with every single guy, but in my experience, getting that experience out of the bullpen can be really helpful. Now, one thing I think it helps with is, I think it helps guys realize that they can get outs in the big leagues, but it lets them, it pushes them to push their stuff. And a lot of times guys realize when they go in multi-inning stints, they realize, wait, I'm in the 3rd inning and I'm still throwing just as hard as I was in the 1st inning. Like, I can probably go after it a little bit more. And I've seen that a number of times with guys that we've put in the bullpen, and they realize that they can carry their stuff a lot longer than they probably thought. Sometimes as a starter, you have this sense of like working your way into a game, and, I'm going to have to face the lineup the 3rd time through, so I can't show them all my tricks right away. I think that when you send a guy to the bullpen, they realize that just going after guys for as long as you can be really effective. And I've seen that with a bunch of guys. I think we saw that with Azalea down the stretch, and I think we saw it with Steele. And hopefully that, as they translate transfer into the rotation at some point, I think that that aggressiveness, I think, can really help them.
Jed, just to follow up on Gordon's questions, when do you anticipate kind of baseball spending to return to, say, 2019 levels?
I don't know exactly what that is, but
or I guess how has 2 years of the pandemic impacted what you plan to do moving forward?
Sure. Well, we'll sit down and sort of talk through our exact budget. I mean, obviously, everyone operates within a budget, but I expect to have, like I said, I expect to have, resources to go out and to be active in free agency. Exactly what that budget is, it doesn't really help us to talk about that publicly for obvious strategic reasons. But I expect to, like I said, I expect to have the resources available to be active.
Jed, you've talked a lot about pitching, and Rossi said, if to get back to winning ways, it's pitching and defense. I'm curious, do you view defense as a priority, trying to get it back to that, 2020 Gold Glove level, or is that more of a finishing touch type thing in your view?
Yeah, I think it's all tied together. I think it's ultimately run prevention, right? You can talk about pitching, but all that really matters is that you can prevent runs, and defense is a big part of that. Yeah, we weren't as good this year defensively. Obviously, you trade a guy like Javi that takes a bite out of the defense. Nico's injuries hurt us in that regard. I thought he was embarking on like a really special defensive season for us, and I think he can be an impact defender. So yeah, I think you're looking at the wrong things if you're not focusing on defense as you think about pitching. They're kind of one and the same as you prevent runs. Certainly, I like I said, I think we put too much pressure on our defense this year without missing enough bats. The ball was in play a lot, and that's a hard thing to overcome. So we need to miss more bats, which will help the defense. But we need to make sure we don't lose sight of defense as we build the roster, because Rossi's right. Pitching and defense are such stabilizers. Knowing going into each game you've got a chance to win because your pitchers are going to get you into the game and give you a chance. And we just had too many games this year. We didn't give ourselves a chance to win. Too many games were down early. That puts too much pressure on the offense. Guys press, and like I said, we took ourselves out of too many games early. We need a pitching staff and a run prevention environment that we can kind of get into each game and be competitive every night, and that'll give us a chance to compete and win. If you're down 5-1, 6-1 in the third inning over and over, that's not giving yourself a chance to win. And that happened a lot this year.
Jed, you guys had that revolving door at the backup catcher position a lot this year for a lot of different reasons, but things kind of stabilized when you brought in Chirinos. Seeing how seamless that transition was for him, and seeing how banged up Wilson was at the end, is bringing him back something that you guys would be considering?
Yeah, he's a great teammate. I know the coaching staff thought the world of him, and I really thought his presence meant a lot to us. I think with Wilson, I think he played too much, and I would just say that directly. I think that we did have that revolving door at backup catcher. It felt like we could never keep anyone healthy, and Rossi and I talked about throughout the year, it was hard to not play Wilson a lot, but you definitely got worn down. I think he's an elite offensive player, but it's hard to be an elite offensive player when your legs are gone, and I think I think that's something that we have to really focus on this offseason is building a roster and setting it up to make sure that, we can keep Wilson as an elite offensive player, because you play a guy too much. And like I said, you're eventually the nicks and dings of catching and just the fatigue of your legs and things like that are going to reduce your impact. So I think that's really important. We knew given the backup catching struggles that was happening as we went, but it was something that was sort of unavoidable in a lot of ways. And hopefully we can remedy that going into next year.
Jed, Ortega solidified the leadoff spot for you guys, mostly against right-handed pitching. How do you see that role of leadoff man having evolved in baseball now, since Fowler was your guy, and all the looking at different guys over the last few years and figuring out how that role impacts your offense?
I mean, I'll be honest, Bruce, I'm pretty stubborn on this topic. I'm old enough to remember us getting destroyed for leading off Kyle Schwarber. What a horrible idea that was. And there's no way you can do that. That's terrible. And I don't know, I watched him lead off last night, and I watched him lead off most of the season and have huge success. So I think that's a tough one, right? Like, this guy was an elite leadoff hitter this year. He led off so many games of homers, and we couldn't, when we did it, it didn't work. And so I just hit your best hitters the most often is kind of how I look at lineup construction. I know, with 3 batter minimum, I'm being a little bit flippant. I know you have to be strategic about how your left right mix and things like that, but it's hard to go wrong hitting your best hitters most often. And that's ultimately what I think we should focus on. And, I think that, putting a guy in a leadoff spot and having him struggle, I mean, it has happened to us a bunch of times, but I think some of that's randomness. And I don't think that's, as the Schwarber example proves, it's not like he's incapable of leading off, or he's so he is some reason he can't do it. It didn't work for us. It worked for someone else. I've been on good teams that let off Kevin Youkilis, and so, like I said, guys that get on base, guys that give the pitcher trouble right away. I think that'd be my focus. Just hit your best hitters the most often.
Speaking of the leadoff spot, I mean, coming into the season, Ian Happ was thought to be the guy that you guys could put there, after he had such an extreme offensive season on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, how do you see his fit going forward, and how do you evaluate a season that has such drastic highs and lows?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at last season, it was a little bit like that too. He was awesome early in the season, had a slump at the end. This year, obviously, he struggled for a little bit longer, and it was, it took him a while to get going. And when he did get going, he was a truly elite offensive player. I think Ian there's every reason to think he is that player. I think he can be an elite offensive player. I think he has to smooth out his performance a bit. And I think that comes with maturity, learning how to get through some slumps a little quicker. I think that's part of a player's maturation process is dealing with some of those lows, and whether that's a mental thing, whether that's some mechanical cues that he can figure out. I think that's, like I said, I think that's part of his maturity, but I have no reason to think he won't be able to do that. I think he's perfectly capable of batting leadoff, no doubt. I think he's got great, command of the strike zone. He makes really good decisions at the plate. And so I see no reason why he can't, get on base and be a catalyst for the offense. And I'm just excited for him. It was a season that was certainly looking like it was going to be potentially a lost season for him at an age where he shouldn't be having that kind of season. And for him to take off the way he did for 2 months, I think he goes into the offseason with a ton of confidence. And, all the things I've said, he knows we've discussed that, he needs to smooth those things out, but what an unbelievable performance for those 2 months. And it was a lot of fun to watch.
Jed, you mentioned the bullpen early in the season, that formula with the veteran guys at the bat. Do you think adding a couple more veteran guys to the mix will be important, or do you think you have seen enough from some of these young internal options that you kind of have maybe a formula in-house already for that bullpen?
Yeah, I think the blend is really important. I think that, well, first of all, it takes a ton of guys to form a bullpen. And so, creating depth will be a huge part of what we have to do. But yeah, I think having a veteran presence down in that bullpen is really important. I think that, we've seen it with, guys like Stropey, with guys like Chafin, like Kimbrel, where I think that leadership really matters. I think, it's an unusual job. You're down there in the bullpen, you're together. You've got to go out there and get oftentimes the most critical outs of the game. And I think having that veteran leadership down there means a lot. And I think, like I said, Chafin and Kimbrel on this year's team, they took those guys under their wing and kind of taught them how to prepare, how to get ready, what to think about. And so I like the fact that we have power arms coming up through the system. I think that's going to really help. But I also think having that, finding some guys that not only can pitch well, those guys pitch really well, but also guys that can provide that direction, I think is really important to have a good bullpen.
How much catching up do Braylon Marquez and Miguel Amaya have ahead of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the nature of the last two seasons, I think they're different cases. I think Amaya, last year was excellent. He had some part of a season before he got hurt. Braylon obviously missed the full year. Right now he's healthy and throwing and ready to go, and we're trying to time his pitching up with this spring. There's no point in ramping him up, having him throw a ton right now, shutting him back down and doing that again. So we're trying to time that effectively. He's healthy and ready to go, but certainly, there was some really bright spots from a young pitching standpoint. But obviously, I think Braylon with his arm and his ability and not having him this year, certainly that was a disappointment. And hopefully he's healthy and ready to go this spring, and he can be a shot in the arm for us for sure.
As a reliever or a starter, have you determined that, or just? Well,
Unclear. I think, pitching weapon, I think, so to speak, I would say. But I would also say, like, to your question, I think it's valid to ask how many innings he's going to have next year. We're going to have to be careful, coming off of a COVID season, coming off of a season we didn't pitch. I think those are constantly issues that we're having to ask and address. Is that, we're going to have innings limits on him. We're going to have to figure out when to use that. Not dissimilar to the way we had to use Adbert this year, right? That we had to be aware of his health and aware of his innings. And I think our staff did a really good job with Adbert of navigating those things.
Jed, with those two guys, and then looking at someone like Nico Hoerner, is winter ball something that might be a possibility for all those guys to get some more at-bats and more innings?
Yeah, we've had conversations with all those guys about that. No final decisions yet, but yeah, it's the balance of going to play winter ball, which is a great experience, a great life experience from a competitiveness standpoint, and getting more at bats versus just working out, getting a chance to get your body in great shape going forward. Winter ball probably does delay some of that a little bit. So some of those discussions are ongoing, and we don't have any decisions right now, but it's a good question because we have had those discussions with those guys.
Jed, it was a few years ago, I think at the GM meetings or something, where you said you can't really do the bullpenning thing throughout a full season. Maybe not 1 through 5 in the rotation, but I'm curious with guys like Alzolay, Thompson, Steele, maybe even Marquez. Is there a way you can fill a couple rotation spots with guys that go 3-4 innings?
I think you can. Yeah, I think you can. I think, yes. I don't think you can do that with the whole staff. But I think that certainly we've seen teams do it a creative job of piecing some rotation spots together with guys going, to your point, 3 and 4 innings at a time, and sometimes that can actually give your bullpen more of a break than starting. And so the most important thing is like, how do you get 27 outs in a game? And I think that the way that's happening in baseball is evolving, and I think that's in a lot of ways a good thing. You're not going to get 21 outs and then turn it over to the 8th inning guy and the closer that often. I feel like when that does happen now, it feels like a night off, and it doesn't happen as much as it used to. So with that in mind, if you have some power arms that are better to get 9 to 12 outs, then you have to use your roster effectively. I mean, I think Tampa is a perfect example of, they've done such a good job of, they've got some starting pitchers, but they've got some guys that they think are good for a certain number of outs or a certain number of times through the lineup, and they do a really good job of getting 27 outs. And it's not always with getting the first 18 to 21 out of a starter.
Back to Nico, and you just mentioned, obviously he didn't get to finish the season the way he wanted to health-wise, but what have conversations been like with him, and what's the emphasis for him this offseason, both in terms of getting healthy and managing that through a full season, but also just, positionally, not necessarily knowing what position he's going to play next year?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think on the first point, he's frustrated, as you'd expect. I think most of the conversations with him are about that frustration. He had such high hopes for this season, given the physical condition he came in with. And, he's, multiple different injuries, some random, and some soft tissue. And we've obviously talked about how to address those things with his, high performance work, with his, strength and conditioning, and making sure he's he's ready to go and addressing those issues in the offseason. So yeah, it was a frustrating season in a lot of ways, but I also think he was able to prove to himself that I think he knows the impact he can have on the big leagues when, he impacts the ball at this level. I mean, he's a really impactful player. He knows he may move around next year. He knows he may not. And I think I would just say that he embraces that. He knows his versatility is really valuable. He knows that the modern game really does embrace what he does well. And so he may be in a situation where he's playing at one spot every day. He may be in a situation where he moves around. But that moving around, as Javi has shown, as Chris has shown, that doesn't detract from your value. In some ways, it actually adds to it. And so he embraces all of that and knows that we may not know exactly what his role is, going forward, but we know he'll be a significant part of our team, and he'll be in the lineup almost every day.
Did he, for lack of a longer way to explain it, get too thick, too muscle bound? Do you think for the baseball athlete that he is and what he represents at multiple positions?
I mean, it's a question we've asked, and we'll continue to ask. I mean, trying to figure out what his best physique is, what his best weight is and strength is to play a full season, as you said, moving around. So yeah, it's a valid question and one we'll talk about. I do think, he's a different player when he's impacting the ball the way he was. So I think the added strength definitely helped his game, but we have to make sure he can stay on the field. And that's one of the hardest challenges when you're deconstructing injuries and things like that, is like, where do the strength, gains lead to a hamstring injury? Where do they lead to his oblique injury? And it's not like you have perfect answers, but it's certainly your question is valid and one that we've definitely talked about, and we'll continue to monitor with him to make sure that he's like prepared to play a full major league season.
Following up on Bruce's question, I know it was a really goofy year in terms of guys coming back after the short season. There were a lot of injuries, but there were also a lot of guys that had their rehab stunted because of recurring pain and all that. Is that something you're going to look at, or is it just chalk it up to just a unique routine, one was disrupted because of COVID, then having guys come back to play a full season?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, first of all, of course, we're going to look into it and try to figure out, are there things we can avoid, or the things we did do. We wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't really evaluate that. We actually have a medical meeting this afternoon, and those issues will definitely come up. That said, I do think it's a weird year. You're dealing with guys playing a full season after playing, 60 games or fewer the year before. And there's more injuries in baseball this year. I hope that's a blip in the radar, and I hope we get past that and get back to a little bit, more sense of normal when it comes to injuries, especially soft tissue injuries or kind of overuse injuries. So yeah, we're going to listen. We'll do a full evaluation of all those things, and we have to get better. You can't use the COVID season or the increased workload as a crutch. We had a lot of missed time with players, and we have to make sure that we can avoid that as much as possible.
Jed, what kind of role do you see for Jason Heyward coming up the next 2 years? And is there a benefit to having him around when Brennan Davis probably comes up, having a mentor?
Yeah. I mean, I think Jason, not dissimilar to Nico in some ways. This is a year where he couldn't really get it going. And was constantly nicked and dinged and having injuries. And it was a really frustrating season for him in a lot of ways. And, unfortunately that was coming off, his best season with us. He was fantastic in 2020 and showed us what he can do when he's on the field and healthy and hitting. So, I know he's got big plans for the offseason, from both an offensive side and a physical conditioning side. And, I think Jason is, throughout the struggles of the second half, he stayed positive. He was a leader down there. I know he always wants what's best for the Cubs, and he's a terrific teammate. So his year was frustrating for him, and I know he'll do everything everything he can this winter to try to address that.
Jed, with someone like Patrick Wisdom, where the strikeout rate just doesn't look sustainable, but he brings you that obvious power as a strength, kind of as he goes into his offseason, sort of what's the message to him in terms of, hey, we want you to get better at the strikeout rate, but we don't want it at the expense of losing what he brought to you guys in that power?
Yeah, it's a hard thing when you start trying to like deconstruct a player, right? That, yes, I mean, the strikeout rate's high, and obviously you'd wish it was lower, but I mean, the impact is real. I mean, his power is real. It was unbelievably fun, watching him play this year. And I also would add that, he's a really valuable defender. He's really good at third. He can move around the diamond. There's a lot of value that he provides. And, I think that it's important, like, as you think about players, like you have to focus on what they do well. I think what he does well, he does exceptionally well. You want to chip away at those weaknesses and see if you can improve them, but you don't want to do those things at the expense of the things he does at a pretty elite level. And he does a lot of things that way.
Hey, Jed, we didn't get a chance to talk to you at the end of the season as you guys went through that, what appeared to be a COVID outbreak. Given what you've gone through really all season with being one of the lesser vaccinated teams and what some of the teams have gone through with outbreaks and stuff, going forward into next year where this thing doesn't seem to be going away, how big is that going to have to be part of your planning for putting your roster together next year?
It's a great question. I guess I hope that that's something that's addressed. I mean, I'd love nothing more than to walk into a fully vaccinated clubhouse every day and to get rid of those concerns. I mean, obviously, I don't think COVID's going away. I think you can still get it when you're vaccinated. I'm a living, breathing example of that. So it's not like we're not going to eliminate it, but that was a horrible feeling at the end of the season. There's no question. And given our vaccination rates, I think we were unbelievably fortunate throughout the year. That what happened at the end of the season was the first time that's happened to us in 2 years. And I think, we were really careful in 2020. I think that, candidly, I think it might have been really fortunate this year to avoid outbreaks. We had a couple coaches, get it. I got it. Rossi got it. But, ultimately with players that we were very fortunate to avoid it. It's a terrible feeling, and it's something I hope we can eliminate. Not just as the Cubs. I think ultimately with the Cubs, I hope we can do that. But as an industry, I hope we can get to a place where who's on the COVID list or who's vaccinated and unvaccinated. It'd be awesome if that was not a topic of discussion, and that we could just move forward and not have those concerns about vaccination rates or masks or things like that. It'd be nice to get to a place where the whole sport is vaccinated.
What has your experience been like these last 11 months? I mean, we know you're an experienced baseball man and, ran the Padres and had tremendous experience with the Red Sox. But for your first time as the top baseball official with the Cubs, what was that experience like for you?
It's definitely an interesting year, to say the least. I think in terms of the performance of our team, it was disappointing. I don't think there's any other word that you can use. I mean, you go into a season, especially with the talent that we had, you go into the season, hoping to be playing, this week, and we're not. And I think that, we've changed the expectations of what Cubs baseball is supposed to be. That's one of the proudest things, for me with the Cubs is that we have done that. When we got here, making the playoffs, at random times was acceptable. And now I feel like it's not acceptable. And there's real disappointment when we have a season like this, as there should be. So I think from a team performance standpoint, obviously, like I said, it has to be disappointing because we're not playing right now. Personally, I'm glad I have a really good staff around me, I guess is what I would say. I'm working through the GM search right now, and I'm excited to sort of add a partner, bring someone in that can help me. But I couldn't be more, proud of the guys with our staff, for us to get through, I think, really successfully, a trade deadline, given that we thought we were going to be buyers up until, probably 3 weeks before the deadline, that we were able to kind of, transition, pivot, and be able to make trades I think are going to be really impactful for the future of the franchise. And I was really proud of the way our office handled that. They were able to pick up a lot of slack this year. And with Theo being gone, without sort of having a GM in place. So like I said, that's probably what I would say. Disappointed in the performance on the field, as I have to be. We have to be better. We've raised those expectations, and from a personal standpoint, just grateful that to Rossi and the coaching staff for what they went through this year, and using 69 players, trading 9 players in July, and like I said, grateful to my staff that I have. They're been here for a long time. They all they care about is getting the Cubs back on top, and I think that we were able to handle a lot of work, and I think in those behind the scenes ways, I think we were really effective.
We have anything else for Jed?
Yeah, Jed, switching gears a bit, just Rowan Wick and the interesting injury he had, just troublesome injury all year. How important was it for the team to get him back and see what he can do in the back end in some high leverage moments in the bullpen this season?
Yeah, I think it was important for both parties. I mean, I think that was one of the more confusing, confounding injuries I've seen, where, we test after test trying to figure out exactly what was the matter. And to his credit, he stuck with it. He grinded through and got back. And he had a lot of outings where he looked like an elite reliever, like he was before he got hurt. And I think for him, getting back was really important. He goes into the offseason healthy. I know he's going to, really keep working. We talked the other day about, tweaking some of his pitches. So he's back, and he's, back talking about, pitch shapes and how to get hitters out, and not talking about this kind of odd rib oblique injury that bothered him for so long. So I think that was really important.
Hey, is there a plan for Brennan Davis next year?
I didn't hear the question.
Do you have a plan in mind for Brennan Davis next year?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, Brennan, he's kind of shot past our expectations for this year, right? So we probably have to readjust them going forward. He's a high school kid who's a great athlete that, probably didn't play quite as much baseball as some of his peers because he played a lot of basketball. And, last year, the alt site was kind of a frustrating season. And so, we started him out in South Bend to sort of kind of work him up slowly, given that. And he kind of blew past what we expected. So probably reluctant to hold him to certain expectations, because like I said, he outperformed these. But I would just say, what a special year he had, being at 3 levels, performing exceptionally well at each one. I'm really proud of him. He sort of kind of burst on the national stage with his futures game performance and kind of never looked back. And he's a really exciting part of our future.
Hey, Jed, just one quickie backing up. The rest of your coaching staff, can we assume they're all coming back other than the 2 guys you mentioned?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, I think that, there will, we're still having conversations with a number of people, but yeah, I think that, the bulk of the staff will certainly be back. And like I said, I think that our staff did a really terrific job this year, grinding through a really difficult year where, thanks to trades, thanks to COVID, thanks to injuries, et cetera, we used more players than anyone's used in the history of this game. And I think that they deserve a lot of credit for sticking with that and being positive. And I think, getting the most out of a lot of guys.